In today's lesson, we're going to start talking about logic and adding logic to programs. Up to this point, you have been in control of everything. You've decided what question to ask, and then whatever they answer, you respond to that because the question that you ask can only give one kind of parameter. For example, what is your name? And you would say, the person responds, my name is David, and then you say, hello, David, or that's a great name, David, or something like that. Today now we're going to start moving the control to the user, and we write in our programs logic that responds to what the user is saying or asking for or doing. And so what we've done thus far is, what state do you live in? And I'll say New York, and it says you live in New York. Now, let's add some logic to this, and we want to learn today the if statement. And the if is asking a question. If, and in parentheses, we put the logic. If state, that's the variable. Now, do you remember one equal sign is where we move something from the right to the left? We fill in a variable. For example, here we said equals prompt, and that what we're doing is we're taking the prompt and putting it in state. So we can't use that in the if statement, and so for now we're going to use 3 equal signs. You can use 2, and it will almost always work, but 3 is same value, same kind of variable. So get in the habit of using 3 quotes. If state is equal to, and I will put New York, then we put the curly brackets, and in here we put what we want to do if the if statement is true. And so I will say alert, hello, fellow New Yorker. Let's just say New Yorker. And I'm going to put here just an alert. Conversation over. Just a way to mark the end of our program. And so let's run this. And it says, what state do you live in? And if I put New York, it says you live in New York. And then it says, hello, fellow New Yorker. And the conversation is over. I'm going to take out that alert, you live in New York State, for now, just so it flows faster and better. Now, let's run this again and say I live in Ohio. Now the conversation's over. Nothing happens. So you see that logic said that if it's equal to New York, then alert, hello, New Yorker. Now, inside the parentheses, it has to be true. And so we could use a not equals, and we'll use 2, not equals New York. Let's change our conversation to say, let's be nice, don't you wish you lived in New York? What state do you live in? Ohio. Don't you wish you lived in New York? Now let's change this back to an equals, and let's make some room, and let's copy this multiple times, and let's change it to Ohio and Boston, or not Boston. Let's change it to Maine. and Florida. And we can set up a response. Go New York. Love the chili. Maine. Eat more lobster. Visit Disney. So if I run this now, if I say Ohio, it says love the chili. If I run it again, sorry about that. If I run it again, and I say Maine, eat more lobster. So you get the idea here. Okay, now we want to add a little bit to this. And so let's get rid of those responses. And if they live in New York, we say go New York. Now we want to introduce the else statement, which says if what was in the brackets or the parentheses is not true, then we'll alert don't you wish. And so we run that. What state do you live in? And I say Ohio. It says, don't you wish you lived in New York? And so you can see that what happened here is that if this is true, then go New York. If it's not true, we say, don't you wish you lived in New York? When we're talking about logic, there's so many ways that you can deal with a problem. For example, this asks the question, what state do we live in? And what if we respond with NY? Don't you wish you lived in New York? Well, the person's thinking, I did say New York. And so how would we fix that so we can accept NY? Now, what if they put in capital NY and lowercase ny? Now, we'll get to some of that logic later on where we start worrying about the best way to edit fields. But, for example, one solution would be to change whatever they put in to all capital letters, and then it would always be compared against NY. But people would put N period, Y period. And so you can see that there's a lot to think about when you start dealing with a user and the various ways that they can input it. But let's say, for example, that we want to accept just NY or New York. So I can say else if, and this is a new statement now, and the else if would be, I'm sorry, you should have put it right here. Else if state equals NY, then it will say, and I'm going to put this in one, if the state is equal to New York, say this. Else, so if it's not, if the state says NY, and that needs to be in parentheses, then say alert let's do the opposite. New York, we'll spell it out. And then now we come up here with our else. And this is where this would go. And so you can see that should line up with the else. So you can see that if you live in New York, spelled out, go NY. If you live in NY, go New York, spelled out. Else, don't you wish to live in New York? Let's see how it works. What state do you live in? NY. Go New York. What state do you live in? New York. Go NY. What state do you live in? Ohio. Don't you wish you lived in New York? And so the indenting helps you to keep it straight, but it could get sometimes quite complicated, and this is where comments are going to come in to play, to where I might say, something like New York spelled out. And the reason I would do this is I probably wouldn't do this in a business because I wouldn't be checking it this way, but this is the core of our program. And I'll put initials, and then everything else. And this helps me to keep straight what my intentions are. And I would probably add a lot of space. I like white space. And so you can see if New York State, if it's the initials, if it's everything else, and that helps me to keep it straight. So there's the if and the else if and the else statement.